Welcome to Creativity, the podcast where art and engineering collide. Today we have a very special guest named Wes Faler, the CEO of Space. Wes, can you introduce yourself a little bit?
Hey, Jeremy. Wes Faler here. Pleasure to meet you. Yep, I co-founded a little company called Space down in southern Tampa near the airport. And I have a background classically trained as a manufacturing engineer, and then spent a lot of time slinging bits and bytes for dollars as a software engineer, and then later turned rocket scientist and RF engineer.
Wow, that's really great. Now you went to let me think, GMI, right?
Kettering. Yeah, GMI,
Kettering.
now called Kettering University in Flint, Michigan.
Yeah, I think it's been
education.
It's been Kettering for quite a while, I guess. I think.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you went there and you worked for, I guess, probably not GM, but one of the top three.
Dow Corning Corporation.
Oh, Corning. For some reason, I thought you worked in automotive, but I guess you just...
I did a few stints at Ford down at the Rouge plant, babysitting robots for a couple of weeks, which was a really nice gig. They had quite an impressive line. But my co-oping was with Dow Corning Corporation. Not Corning Glass, not Dow Chemical, Dow Corning out of Midland. And a couple of facilities in Midland, Michigan, and then also down in Kentucky.
Okay. And so I guess during this time, I mean, you worked for manufacturing for what, 20 years, maybe a little bit more than that? Is that right?
Yeah. So right after college, of course, I graduated with a manufacturing systems engineering degree. So real systems, high level view of the world. Probably would have been a minor in AI based on the number of classes I took in it, but it wasn't really technically offered at the time. And I'm glad it is these days. Lots of opportunities there. And then was fascinated with software control of manufacturing. So spent a very long time as a software consultant writing custom software for a lot of manufacturing companies. So applying my engineering through software in all sorts of manufacturing situations
So that's
forever.
So that's interesting. I guess when you say your degree, I would have almost thought you were more of an industrial engineer by training, but you were more on the control side. Is that
That's
correct?
where my interest was. The training had industrial engineering. The right way to sit, the right way to light a workstation, keep people comfortable and productive.
Sure, I'll just go ahead and scoot up now, so you don't disapprove of my my
OSHA
posture.
wouldn't approve of that slouch. That wouldn't pass muster, man.
Yeah.
But there was a lot of hands-on experiments with materials, a lot of material knowledge, a lot of material science, and I just got fascinated with the how things run, the software that operates things. Is where I decided to take it.
So I guess that's a lot of background, but during this time, I mean, you always had an interest in spacecraft and space travel of some sort, correct?
Who doesn't?
Right.
So yes,
but
yeah, that's a safe thing on anyone on this podcast, right?
Oh, absolutely. But I mean, unlike most people, you actually pursued it in your spare time, right? You had I think you told me one time you had and I know it was from Tampa Hackerspace, but yeah, I think you told me one time that you ran basically like an AI simulation in your apartment, I think, for a long time.
We've had too many beers together, and now you're using it against me. Back probably, I don't know, 03, 04, back in the aughts, I decided I ought to do something about the bald spot emerging. And I said, well, I'm going to try to get back to some of the science I really liked back in high school. Great physics teachers, great, really inspiring science teachers in general. And I decided to get back into simulation code, plasma simulations, particle accelerator simulations. I'm always fascinated with the belief that you could simulate something, find the right thing, and then build it, and it would work like you simulated it. It doesn't really work that way, but that was fascinating at the time.
Sure, at least it gives you a place to start. But basically, you designed a thruster at the time, or did that come a little bit later?
That came a little later. I was just looking for a general particle accelerator at the time.
Oh, and, so something simple like that, of course, right?
Yeah. just a little tabletop thing just to play around with 300 to 400,000 volt electrons. That's where time dilation starts to matter for electrons.
Hmm.
And that, of course, fascinated me. I never quite got to those experiments. That's when the thruster bug hit, and that's where I've been. I might go back to those electron experiments someday.
Well, the electron experiments, what was the purpose in that when you were doing these, or simulating it at least? What
I
is
just
that
wanted
for?
to, I wanted to understand. You always hear these summary articles. Einstein said this, Einstein said that, time dilation this, time dilation that. I wanted to be able to put as close to hands-on to something like that as you could, understanding what does that really mean in the lab. An electron experiencing time dilation effects shows somehow differently on the scope somehow. What
So,
is that?
so,
I wanted to know that.
so what you're saying is that once you get up to 300,000 volts, which is, a staggering number, once you get up to that range, time actually starts to get a little bit wonky.
Yeah.
Is that
In
correct?
my understanding is that's when electrons get a meaningful percentage of the speed of light, and time dilation starts to affect them by a couple percent.
Okay. Hmm.
And that's when they would start to behave differently, in theory, than to others. And so I wanted to know what that felt like hands-on as an engineer. That engineering hands-on. What does it look like on a scope? How is it different?
And in your case, it was, how does it look like how would it look like on a simulated scope? Is that
Yes.
a fair?
Yeah. Because I could barely solder at the time. It'd been a long time since I'd soldered anything, and I figured I better just get it right in the math first. And then I started, the least activation energy was to take 20 some years of software engineering and pour it into writing simulations.
So you wrote the simulation of basically time dilation and very high voltage electrons, correct? And
Yeah,
then, and that was the early 2000s, the aughts, as you, I guess that's the right name for it.
that's
But
what you
then
ought to call it.
what you ought? Nice. Yeah. So after you after that, you realize you ought to be doing something a little different, and then you started
Yeah,
simulating thrusters. Is that when did
yeah.
that come into play?
As soon as I had an interesting result, I found how do I check it? How do I know this is a realistic result? And has the simulator given me a right number? And I couldn't find test cases on the internet to help me double check my numbers. What one, I guess that means there's an area of research that would be kind of cool to go into.
Oh
But
yeah.
two, I'm like, well, how do I check this software? I need a way to test it. We always need a way to test software. And plasma simulations came up as a way of testing. So I started tossing plasma in, and got the simulator was testing well with that mix of plus and minus particles that are plasma.
And when
Thus, we
you
could
say this, it's all virtual. It's all in the computer,
all
correct?
virtual, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. So the simulator was testing well against those, and that's really when the thruster bug hit me. So, well, what can we do with this moving plasma? Is thrust possible here? And just ADD kicked in, and down the shiny road rabbit hole I went.
Sure. So okay. So let's just say you started in the simulations in the early 2000s. When did you actually
Yeah,
start? When did you go get into thrusters? When did that sort of happen?
that probably hit in about 505.
Oh, five.
So
Okay.
probably had a couple of years of just general tinkering, realizing my soldering skills weren't up to par, and getting back into simulations.
Sure.
And I
So
started. Go ahead.
so you simulate this from '05 until that's at some point
Uh, yeah, I
at some
did
point
that
you go
for.
from simulating to owning your own space company. I guess that's very interesting to me. So how long were you simulating before you, I guess, started putting the simulation to, into the
Um,
real world, so to speak?
yeah, so I tinkered for about a year in the simulation, and I was seeing, which things that should be thrust. And I thought, okay, well, I'd like to build some of these, but then, you know, friends and everything are at the back of my head saying, well, why not build something unique? Are you going to do a Me Too project? or are you going to put something unique on it? And I thought, well, I'd like to do something unique. And every idea, like, oh, I have this idea, patented. I have this idea, patented, 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 patented. So, I mean, kudos for the patent search engines for really helping focus a dream. But
Yeah, no kidding. I can only imagine how much that would have cost you in lawyers if you didn't have Google to help you.
oh yeah, that would have been frustrating. So, but see, I fundamentally believe creativity needs some constraints. That creativity is a way of meeting constraints, and the unbounded, I don't think I do terribly well. I need a little pressure. Don't use that against me, man.
No,
But
no,
I need a little constraint to bump up against, to push off against, to rebel against, and
no. I agree. I mean, I think that's like, even the title of this podcast is creativity, because I feel like, art unbounded, becomes art, which is great. It's great in its own way, but then you put the restrictions on it. You say, okay, we got to do this, do that, and then it becomes, well, to me that becomes engineering. You take the physical, your creativity, physical constraints, and what you're trying to do, and it's really, really a beautiful thing, I think. And that's
oh yeah.
seems
But
like,
even engineering needs a set of requirements. You need something to work against.
yeah.
Try telling an artist or an engineer you can paint or design anything you want. Go to it.
Yeah, I've often thought, if I had, limitless money, or at least, at least Jeff Bezos type money, I'd probably fire, a team of engineers just to kind of make all the things that I come up with in my head that I don't have time for.
Oh, that'd be cool.
Oh, that'd be awesome. So, if somebody wants to donate.
Where's the donate jar?
Yeah. Well, getting back to our story, I guess. So basically you simulate it, and you basically come up with something that you decide, I can make this and it will be new. What was that?
Let me fill in a couple gaps there. So, like I said, all these ideas led to patent. Well, these patent holders often they cite work. So I started digging into the work they were citing. And I found this book from the 1950s that seemed to be the root of most of these. And what was interesting about it is up in the first 20 or 30 pages, they basically said, "Thou shalt not accelerate electrons."
Hmm.
I'm like, well, that's near and dear to my heart. I just got done thinking about that. Why?
And what's the name of this book?
I've got to dig that up. I forgot it. It's on my shelf, and I can't quite see it.
That's okay. We'll say we'll take it as a truth. I guess maybe we'll put it in the show notes or something.
I think it's like The Physics of Electric Propulsion.
Okay.
But basically, there's a set of differential equations, which are the really obnoxious ones that you get to in mid-college and realize those are the equations that actually run the world.
Absolutely.
And
I feel like calculus 1, 2, and even 3 were kind of like just building up to,
they're like therapy for differential equations. So when you get there and see the truth, you don't go insane. So the book walks through the differential equations that govern accelerating particles and does a real nice job of it. And then they show, here's the core equation. And if you integrate this equation in order to see the way the particles really move, you find that there is no closed form, whiteboard friendly, blackboard friendly, 1950s friendly equation. They can only be solved with numbers. There is no algebra that tells you the performance. It's a number only solution. Unless you only accelerate one of the particles, positive or negative, never accelerate the other. If you do that, then the system doesn't oscillate. And because it doesn't oscillate, it has an asymptotic closed form solution. So if you make that assumption, only accelerate one, don't accelerate the other, then you can substitute algebra in and say, on average, it'll tend to be blah. And now you can integrate that and end up with this closed form solution. It's only valid if you do not accelerate the other species. You can accelerate electrons, not ions, vice versa.
Okay.
So otherwise, you end up with a time-dependent solution, one that oscillates in time, where sometimes one little burst of particles is being accelerated a little more than the other, and they backtrack, they backflow, they ebb, they flow, they make vortices, all the things like a flowing river would do. It's kind of messy, technically predictable, but really messy. Nothing you could give on a quiz, on a whiteboard or at a graduate level quiz.
So, okay, so you come to this conclusion that you can accelerate one electron at a time to do something.
Yeah, only one species at a time.
One species. So you could accelerate many electrons, just not an ion as well.
Right.
Okay.
So I said, all right, so that's the guidance that all of these patented devices have followed. That is passed down through generations as God's own knowledge. Here is the algebraic equation for how a thruster performs. Period. End of question. And in reality, it's based on these assumptions about only accelerating one species. So I said, well, I've got a simulator that's doing well. What would happen if I broke that rule? I'm not limited by the whiteboard or blackboard of the 1950s. I have a mega supercomputer sitting here under the desk playing video games. What would happen? What would happen if we accelerated both? And I started scratching my head and said, I don't know of a good design for that. So I pulled back out again 20 some years of software engineering. But let's write an AI that would help me find a design that would kind of work under this new rule.
And what year is this roughly? Is this 2010 maybe?
That's probably 05.
Oh, okay, still
probably
okay.
05.
05, okay.
Yeah. So I had been getting into genetic programming, Cartesian genetic programming, which I got interested in because of the Google Lunar X Prize and some support work around there. So I could be off in the years. Somebody might fact check the years there. Could be off in that. It was somewhere around when that happened. So maybe that was 07 by then. I'm not sure.
Okay, but if it somewhere between 10 and 15 years ago, I guess is what you're saying.
So I started to use that genetic programming as a way of coming up with physical designs. And those designs would get plugged into the simulator, and it would tell me whether it generated thrust or not. Every couple of days, the simulator would hand me back a few results, and I would tell it which ones I liked and which ones I didn't, and it would keep tweaking the ones I liked and ignore the ones I didn't. Somewhere in there, I learned GPU programming for CUDA GPU coding. That made the simulator 20 sometimes faster, so I could get more results every day. Start to plug away at that, and it took about 2 years worth of that dance between the AI and me. AI would suggest something, I would say I like it, and then I would sometimes let it run for a couple of days while I went and independently coded whole new ideas on different design families. I'd like to say the AI designed it, but the AI inspired it. It was the muse.
So when you say this, you're still trying to figure out the theory, not the actual thruster that you eventually designed.
Yeah.
Okay. So two years of this, and then you get the theory behind this new, constant.
I've got a gizmo that looks like it can be made. That's about the right size, could be made. Sure looks like it would generate thrust. And I said, all right, I want to make that.
So you've figured out the science at this point, or in theory, but now you need to do the engineering to actually get the thruster so it'll work.
And I was living in Dearborn, Michigan at the time, so southeast Michigan. Fantastic hummus. I miss the hummus. Sorry, it's lunchtime, Jeremy.
Oh, that's okay.
And Tech Shop opened up a half mile down the road.
Which is like you could say a membership-based makerspace before there really were makerspaces, right?
Yeah, yep. There was i3 Detroit and Tech Shop, both opened up right about the same time. I joined both. And i3 Detroit was cool, but I couldn't figure it out socially. I could not figure it out socially. That's on me. I'd always find out about projects after they were happening, after they'd been signed and sealed. And the Tech Shop was walking distance. I could just walk down the street. And
nice.
So I started to get educated because I realized when I tried to make some stuff in the basement that I had not spent those 10,000 hours on refining things with my hands. I did not have good workmanship on vacuum seals or soldering. I didn't have the workmanship I thought I had on there, and it wasn't up to snuff. High voltage, little Dairy Queen cues. You leave them on your solder, they aren't cute. They spark when they're high voltage. You pull the soldering iron away and it's not quite hot enough and it leaves a little point. It's not good for high voltage soldering. I had to level up my skills. That took a while. I worked on that for quite a while. Ended up moving down to Florida, down to Tampa during that process.
And this is when you were actually trying to build the thruster that you would eventually use for your stuff.
Knowing that I needed some pressure, I noticed a company called Interorbital Systems was offering a small satellite launch. They had a kit for building a small satellite and a launch for it. So I took some money I had saved for a car and bought that. There's a metronome, a clock, a timer that I can't control. And the idea is to use that satellite to test the thruster.
And this is like an earthbound. Basically, you put the thruster in this. Is it a fake satellite, or is it actually something ready to go into space?
It's supposed to be a real satellite ready to go into space. They haven't gotten there yet. Turns out launching is really hard, but I'm incredibly grateful they had that program when they did, because it was the motivation I needed to accelerate my own learning pace and stop fiddling around and get more serious about it.
Well, this kit, did it come with a actual like launch timeline, or was it?
They had a launch timeline. It slipped, of course.
Okay.
But
was this part of the Cube Quest challenge, or was this something unrelated?
Long before that, unrelated. But I wanted to put my thruster in that satellite. So I thought, okay, I've got probably a 2-year deadline for that. So I need to produce a thruster, learn the skills for a satellite, etc. And I ended up going to a mini maker fair down here in Tampa and showing off the satellite. I'd showed it at a Detroit Maker Fair. So I showed that off at Tampa Maker Fair. And that's when all the people around us at the end of that mini said, hey, there ought to be a makerspace in Tampa. And thank God some people stepped up and took care of that. And I ended up joining. They founded the Tampa Hackerspace. I ended up joining there. And that's really when my skills started to pick up. And more importantly, that's when I started to make really good friends of like-minded creative explorers.
Sure. And so after you joined Tampa Hackerspace, met the right people, then is that when the Cube Quest challenge, is that when that went onto the scene? Okay. And
so by then I'd had a small vacuum chamber in my home apartment, second bedroom, and had built a little thrust stand in there. So some real sensitive sensors that as you flex them, so the thruster would push down and flex the sensor. And so I leveled up on my op amps and my data logging and Arduinos to control everything embedded within the vacuum chamber. And I'd had some thrust. I had some plumes, used the laser cutter at the Hackerspace to make some first thrusters out of layers of acrylic. So I had a fair amount of success there and was convinced, quote unquote, short road from here.
And what year was that?
13 or 14 at that point.
Okay. And so you've got the thruster somewhat going. You've got something that I guess works, at least has been tested. And then the Cube Quest challenge comes up, correct? Is that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And this is, I guess, for those that aren't familiar, the idea is to actually launch these cereal box size satellites into space, correct? And then you're making them loop around the moon and then go past Mars. Is that kind of the short story?
Yep. We've had to change the Mars plan, but yes, that was the story at one point.
Okay, but anyway, so this comes up. You realize you can get on, in theory, get in on the Cube Quest challenge to actually put your satellite into space, and this is with your thruster, which is what it would fit in the palm of your hand, correct? I mean, it's a tiny, but
very tiny. It's low thrust, but it's more thrust than usual for something that size.
Yeah, I was going over some of my. I guess I interviewed you a long time ago, and it was 5,000 meters per second change in velocity over, just total, which is
which is quite high for a thruster that size.
For a thruster the size of, I guess, a tennis ball.
Fist.
A fist, okay.
about the size of your fist.
Okay.
It's about one Rubik's cube, 10 by 10 by 10, and that's all the fuel and everything.
That's all the. That's. I mean, just the scale of that, besides being in space, is pretty amazing. You test this out. You get on the Cube Quest challenge, and then at this point you're competing against university teams for an actual seat on the SLS. Is that right?
Yep, SLS, now the Artemis 1 mission.
Okay.
Like my college, it's been rebranded.
So it's the same thing, just different different name.
Oh, different branding.
Okay.
I like the Artemis name better, actually. It's catchier.
Yeah, it sounds nice.
So, yeah, the motivation for Cube Quest Challenge was I went out to San Francisco and saw their conference, the kickoff, and they were very clear. They were looking for wild ideas. They wanted to see the craziest ideas that people come up with because they wanted a wide range of ideas and to understand how different from the NASA way can you be and still have a successful design and launch program. So when you think about it from their standpoint, from NASA's view of creativity, they were looking to challenge their status quo and say, let's see if people will show us other ways of doing this and help us know what bounds can we stretch.
Well, and the fact that your thruster is based on basically everything else is based on a different paradigm, but you've actually gone back to the scientific roots, even beyond what everybody takes as the absolute truth and come up with something different, right?
Yeah.
So, and this is called your
Same.
constant Q thruster. Is that right?
Yes, it is.
Okay, and that's Q is
because
constant charge, maybe.
Yes, man, you have a great memory, Jeremy.
Oh, thanks. I guess.
I mean, not to drink heavily with you. You have a very good memory.
Yeah.
But yeah, Q is charge, and so in addition to accelerating accelerating both types of particles, positive and negative, the other thing we do is rather than hold a constant voltage on the output acceleration, which is what most do, most put say 1,000 volts or 500 volts on their output, and they hold that voltage constant. Rather than hold that constant voltage, we hold a constant charge on our output. When if you think back physics, way back when two charges, the voltage between them depends on their distance. So the closer they are, the higher the voltage. The farther they are, the lower the voltage.
Okay, it seems like.
So
I guess I'm just thinking that in the context of a capacitor. I guess that's not quite.
So
okay.
It depends on distance. So if one of them is fixed because it's on your device, and then the other one is moving, it's your exhaust plume, and it moves from inside the thruster, and then it moves out to right parallel with the exit plate, and then it moves away. The voltage between that charged particle and the exit plate is changing constantly as it moves. So the only way your power supply can maintain a constant voltage on the output plate is if it is taking away and adding charge to the output plate dynamically as accelerated particles pass it. So the power supply is dealing with lots of current coming in and out of it constantly. That's the challenge of those kind of supplies. The current is flowing both ways constantly. Small little nudges constantly both ways is what's the wear and tear on those supplies. So for me, I built a supply that puts a constant charge on the output plate and lets the voltage differ as a particle passes. This means the power supply is simpler to build and smaller.
Okay. So I guess
cheaper. Very important. The maker budget, cheaper.
I guess for those on to look at it very, very broadly, I mean, your thruster you could almost say it's a very carefully controlled capacitor. Is that accurate or is that not?
It's a very carefully controlled failing capacitor.
Okay.
Because we charge it up and then we let it fail. That's where all the smoke comes out.
Okay.
And then it stops. It actually rides an unsteady operating cycle. Again, remember that time-dependent differential equation. So it actually charges up, and then there's a big outrush of particles, outrush of negative, and then an outrush of positive, and then there's a reset period. And that happens about 440 times a second. That's
okay.
what we see.
So this thruster forms the basically the the core of your technology for this CubeQuest challenge, correct?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's what we wanted to demo. Yep.
So you basically end up competing against all these university teams. I think you took first place in the first tournament and fifth place in the second tournament, and that was a while ago. Is that right?
I like your memory for the first tournament, but your memory for the second one is too good and
Oh,
very right.
okay.
Very right.
Well,
No. So
you know,
no.
you
So
give me a lot of credit here. I did a little research, and I've got a little few notes with me. So you know,
I figured that, but I didn't want to call you out on it. You had to own that yourself.
yeah. Well,
So
yeah. So
so what happened? What happened is all these dreams had been built up for a long time. I'd been working on a potential satellite for years, along with Don Smith, co-founder of the team, and also he had been working with me. He's co-inventor on the patents. He was my sounding board. We worked a lot through that, and we had been working on this little satellite for a long time before CubeQuest. So when CubeQuest came around, we had a pretty mature vision of what we wanted to do. So we just moved everything over to there, and we got joined by a lot of very gung ho people, and we came out with a strong, I think, apparently well expressed vision for what we wanted. Dream, very dreamy at the time. First ground tournament is all about just write up your dream, and can you hold a sentence as you're excitedly writing it down. And we came out of the gate well organized, and I think that's why we got first in that first round.
nice.
And we were competing against the likes of MIT, a corporation over here in Florida, over in Cocoa Beach, Florida as well. We had a very strong showing. A lot of university teams. There weren't many of us corporations in that.
And you were not a company at this point. You were just some people that got together for this tournament.
We were Team Miles at
Okay.
that point.
Okay. And okay, so first, fifth, and then at that point, my memory slash notes get a little bit more vague. So what?
So the next tournament, 6 months later, we got fifth place, and I'll be honest, we needed to get fifth place in that. Our submission was subpar compared to what we did before. Because the second one, you have to put more engineering to your dream. Less dream, more engineering. And NASA laid it out very nicely. And we did not deliver on the engineering, not even not even on par with our competitors. We were lucky to get that fifth place.
Out of how many teams are doing this?
I think there were 8 at the time.
Okay. So middle of the road, I guess, at that point.
Middle of the road.
Okay.
And I will say, for our creativity, we needed that reality check. There was that high from that first round. There was that high and that belief that you've got it all figured out. And we really needed that reality check that second time around, and I'm glad we got that. Wasn't glad at the time, but hindsight will make a believer out of you.
Sure. So were there other tournaments after that? I think you've got a seat on Artemis at this point in theory. So were there?
Yeah. So there was a third and a fourth tournament. So in the third tournament, we doubled down. We really realized where we had screwed up and really worked hard on the engineering. And yikes. Stage fright. I think we got first in the third tournament again.
Nice.
We really came back aggressively. And just like the pattern, I think that cost us a little bit, because in the fourth tournament we got third, and only the top 3 got to go on Artemis. But we got it, and I'm really, really proud of my friends for that.
Oh yeah, that's great. Proud of yourself, I'm sure too. A little bit at least, right?
I experience more relief than I feel pride. But I'm seeing a therapist about that, so I'd like to see it the other way around. But I do feel pride in my friends. I've watched them level up, and I can't think of a more apt phrase for the process.
So that's cool. But this has been I guess the interesting thing about, just looking at this, hearing about you, interviewing you, is, this has been like a 20-year, not quite a 20-year, almost a 20-year long process to get to the point where,
Yeah.
and you're still waiting for the Artemis to take your satellite up, even though I guess you're ready to go.
As ready as a table full of parts that have to be vibe tested in the next 2 weeks can be. But yes,
And
let's go with ready in bunny quotes.
and how frustrating is that to have to wait around for, I guess, even though like you're right, it seems like you've been right there for years, but I'm sure that's got to be a little frustrating.
You know, it's frustrating sometimes, and then I look back at it because, like you said, it's been a long process, and it could have gone faster if I could have found a way to work on this full time. These are hobby hours. Right? These are hobby hours. I'm still got to earn a paycheck the classic manner.
Well, so you're the CEO of Miles Space, but so you have I didn't realize you have another job as well.
No, not right now.
Oh, okay.
Not right now.
And you're able to do podcasts apparently too. So
so somewhere along the line, Team Miles, we actually came up with another patent to improve the thruster. So that was our second thruster patent. And we also came up with a patent for communication technique, a satellite ground station.
okay.
And that was born out of the idea of we have to talk to the satellite for CubeQuest. So how the heck are we going to do that when we started to call around and saw the prices? Said it might be easier to invent one of our own because there's no way we can afford this.
How much is it to talk to a satellite if I wanted to call whoever? I wouldn't even know.
It's actually changed a lot. These days, we have a strong partnership with Atlas Space. And so I would say talk to them, and they can set you up at a much better price. We were looking at hundreds of thousands of dollars for the mission.
Sure, which I guess you probably don't have lying around, or maybe you do. And if so,
no,
congratulations.
No. I have not yet figured out that side of the world. My hundreds of thousands have been poured into thruster development.
Okay, so the I guess is that what pays the bills for you guys now? I think there was some prize money involved in the CubeQuest challenge as well, if I'm not mistaken.
Yep, we won a total of $100,000 in the CubeQuest challenge, and that all went towards building the satellite. Nobody on the team gets paid for that, according to our teaming agreement.
Wow, that's
by the way, have a teaming agreement. Not too hard, but have one.
Good advice, I guess. Yeah, so you guys basically have, I guess the communications is kind of paying the bills for you guys now?
Or? Yeah, actually. So we founded Miles Space so we would have a company to sell these patents, commercialize the intellectual property the Team Miles had created. And that communication system, that was our first one. And we actually got the attention of Atlas Space with that. And we've had a several-year partnership with them. And we're wrapping up actually a project with the Air Force, working under Atlas.
Oh, nice.
Right now, very successful. I can't leak all the details there, but vindication, validation, all capital letters are great words for this week, as we had some amazing test results come in.
Well, yeah, I saw you driving around in a Bugatti the other day. We're pretty local to you, so I guess
Oh, then there's a doppelganger out there.
I did see a what was it? I can't even remember the name of the car, but it was a very expensive car with somebody that looked like I'll have to cut this because I probably
Johnny
won't cut
Depp?
it.
They look like Johnny Depp.
No, who's like the most famous baseball player that were just retired? Was married to Madonna, I think.
Sport ball? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, I saw somebody who looked like him driving around in a expensive car the other day, and I was like, with that a New York Yankees tag on it too, which I thought was quite a strange coincidence. So anyway,
Florida, everybody comes down here. This is paradise. This is where people save all year to come down to. It's not a surprise.
Yeah, it's a strange thing growing up here because it's not, you don't quite realize how desirable it is in some ways. And it is a nice place. I mean, I wear sandals pretty much all year. Um,
So do you think Florida has this area of Florida, especially the Nature Coast? Do you think it encourages creativity, especially engineering and technical creativity? Does something about this area drive that? Because I have never felt this connected to creativity and expression as I have here in this social ecosystem. And so,
hmm,
what do you think it is?
I don't know. It's hard to say. I honestly, I lived in South Carolina for most of my adult life, and I'd say I was pretty creative there as well. I did grow up here, so maybe it's just so hot that you've got to figure out how to get out of the sun. I mean, I did
There you go.
I did a paper on something one time that was basically it was like the history of air conditioning or something like that, and you see that Florida's population really explodes right after air conditioning was invented. So I guess people had to be, to live here, you've got to be creative, or which I think can maybe have some negative
Okay.
consequences too. I think obviously you've heard the legend of Florida Man, and I think there's some truth to that.
There's a little creativity to Florida Man. I'll give you that.
Little creativity, little misguided creativity sometimes. Um,
That's true. That's true. The Darwin Awards thank Florida Man for the contributions.
yeah, but anyway, I guess getting back to your story about all this, I guess basically you guys went from a team, you had a team agreement, and then you guys formed an actual company to
Yep.
I guess deal with the money and such.
Yep.
Um, I guess one question I had just thinking about this, what you do probably and what you guys established, probably some people would think it was a little bit crazy. I mean, definitely creative and probably a little bit crazy even. I guess what advice would you have to somebody who wants to do something that somebody's never even thought of? I feel like that can be such an amazing thing, but it's kind of hard to get there, I guess, especially at first. And you're kind of to the point where, like you said, you're somewhat vindicated at this point. What would you say to somebody like you 10 years ago who's fooling around in his extra bedroom with AI and thruster ideas and yada 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 or whatever else
Yeah.
this person's come up with?
I'll tell you some of the stuff I wish I would have heard. How about that? Okay.
Okay.
Is face your anxieties and because doing so you will go faster.
What does
Yep.
that mean for you? You mean what do you
Um,
mean?
a little self-doubt will hold you back. It'll cost you a few months, month here, month there. And in hobby time, you don't notice it, but it slows you down. I would like to have been here 5 years ago, not today.
Right. Well,
You know,
I guess what's slowing you down is the rocket launch at this point, not so much your technology, right?
yeah, yeah, mostly, but I've seen people who have mastered the people side of things, and they generate more opportunities than I've been able to generate. And so my advice would be get past of your technical anxieties, embrace the people side of this, and get more people involved. Share your dream. Don't just share your engineering. Share your dream.
So do you think people protect their ideas too much to begin with, or you think
Yeah, yeah. We definitely did. We definitely played the my precious kind of game quite a lot, and held things really close. But the reality is there's an enormous investment required to execute on an idea. You could share the location of the world's biggest gold nugget, and most people would not do anything with that information because the execution is daunting.
right? Yeah, that's an
So
interesting way to put it. And I mean, you're right. If somebody told me, okay, there's a you know gigantic gold nugget located in Colorado, it's 100 feet below the ground. It's like, well, okay, am I gonna somehow take it alone or come up with I don't know what it would
right,
cost to dig that, but probably couple hundred thousand, just execute on that. That's very few
right,
people have the, I guess mental wherewithal. I guess that's the best way to put
exactly,
it.
exactly. And the other thing I would say is don't overthink it. is get started. A little willful naivete will get you committed. And once you're committed, then that becomes the pressure you need to overcome the obstacles, as
Okay.
opposed to just saying, well, I guess I'll wait till this obstacle clears itself and costing more time.
Right, right.
Got to get that personal commitment. And naivety is a great way to get yourself locked in.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess at this point you guys are, and I know you got to go pretty soon, but I guess at this point you guys are waiting for the rocket launch, take your satellite up,
Yes.
and then you'll, I guess, be in space, and that's pretty amazing. So,
That is incredible. We have some other opportunities to get the thruster up there even before that.
oh, really? Like
Yep.
on
And,
a Falcon or something, or is that?
another NASA group is interested in flying the thruster sooner than later.
Okay, and that's
And
not on the CubeSat. It's actually just independent of that. It's another.
independent,
Oh,
yeah.
and that'll be your technology. That's got to
Yeah.
feel so. I mean, I guess it's not there yet, but I guess you're just on the cusp of something really, really amazing, right?
It feels good. It does feel good. It would be incredible to see it up there.
That's awesome.
Just getting to talk with the caliber of these people. I'm like, I feel like I'm leveling up just in vocabulary.
Well, yeah. I mean, maybe you are that caliber of person at this point. I think maybe, it's
Nah, I still got goals. I'm working on it.
yeah.
Thank you, though.
Well, it's just amazing. I'm so glad you were able to come on and talk for a while.
Thanks for having me on, Jeremy. It's been very nice to see you, chat with you again.
Yeah, you too. And I guess if you were to leave people with something, I guess if you have a crazy dream, whether it's to go to space, get your stuff in space or do whatever, it's just, I guess you'd say, get the right people involved, get started, don't doubt yourself too much, and just do it, right? Is that?
Be passionate about your dream, share your passion, invite people to your dream, let them go when they want to walk away. That's okay. And just keep moving forward with it.
That's awesome. Well, I guess I'm sure we could talk all day, but I know you got a business meeting at 2 because or at some time. So that's what you've got to do as CEO, right? So
that's the job.
All right. Well, thanks so much for joining us today, Wes. All the best with Miles Space, and I'll talk to you later, I'm sure.
Thank you, Jeremy. Take care.
Hi, Jeremy Cook here. And as we touched on just a little bit in the podcast, Wes had to go pretty fast because he had a business, something to present for his actual business. So anyway, we're doing our coffee break after the show today. So let me just give a shout out to our top 5 Patreons. That's Brian Moses, Pat Regan, Positive Waves, Old School DIY, that's at GFC62, and Stephen Booker. Thanks so much for helping me make the show, and it's really means a lot that you choose to support it. That's really great. If you want to be a top 5 Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/thecreativitypodcast. Again, that's patreon.com/thecreativitypodcast. We have sponsorship levels as low as $1, but if you're in the top 5, I'll give a shout out to you. That can be your name, a business name, anything like that. It could be actually a pretty cheap advertisement at this point. So anyway, thanks so much for watching. Hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and hopefully we'll have a good episode coming up soon. So thanks a lot, and I will see you later.